Exzellenzen, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren.
Ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting me to this event. It's my pleasure to be here today. And of course, the Berlin Energy Transition Day is in its third year and has become somewhat of a tradition now. And if we look at the breadth of all the various issues we're discussing, we can also see that climate protection is now something that cuts across all policy areas. And this is well deserved because climate change takes everyone, all of society. For instance, it's a matter for international foreign and security policy. It is one of the key requirements for making our world more secure and more peaceful. And at the same time, and this is something that we also felt in Paris and saw in Paris, is that climate change really builds bridges across different borders, continents, philosophies, cultures, and religions. Bridges of understanding and cooperation. At the same time, climate protection is also becoming an indicator of economic development as well. This is very much true for the emerging economies and developing countries in which new technologies pave the way towards improving people's lives whilst also respecting the limits of what the environment can take. But this is also true for industrialized countries in which entire sectors are reinventing themselves. And in Germany, we can see this particularly in our automotive industry. You know that, of course, the automotive industry is one of Germany's most important sectors and has almost 800,000 employees. Over the past few years, we've come a great step forward when it comes to generating our electricity in a climate-friendly way. And by now, renewable energies have become the most important source of our energy. If we look at our transport sector, however, we find that we are very much at the beginning of developing greenhouse gas neutral mobility. So our question must be, how can I actually ensure that German cars will be powered by renewables? Germany has had somewhat of a tradition of looking at alternatives drives with a more skeptical view. And I don't think I'm telling you a secret when I'm saying that e-mobility has not really made it in Germany's cars. But at the same time, we also know that alternative drives are can be extremely competitive. Plug-in hybrids are paying off, and altogether electric drives are becoming more competitive. Last year, more than 500,000 electric cars was sold in China, and in Norway, almost 25% of cars are either electric cars or plug-in hybrids. So I don't think the question really is whether carbon-free cars will really be the dominant mode of transport in our transport system, but when this will be the case and when conventional drives will be in the museums. So the automotive sector is about to be overhauled, and it's quite fascinating what's happening at the automotive industries. If you want to gain an impression of how climate-friendly technologies are developing in our society and transforming our society and our economy, then have a look at the German automotive industry. We also have to look at the financial markets. More and more investors, and this includes state and private investments, are decarbonizing their investments. This includes the Norwegian State Fund and the Rockefeller Foundation, which of course used to earn their money with oil. And many insurance companies are now doing the same. So there's a clear trend towards making climate change part of your company's strategy. The reason for this is not so much that most of the upper management in these sectors would be made up of climate activists. No, these are decisions that are steeped in economic reason that simply reflect the future of our economy. Ladies and gentlemen, we've already started to wave goodbye to coal, oil and gas. And the Paris Agreement is a clear commitment by the international community to an economy that is greenhouse gas neutral. And that becomes so by the end of the century. But Paris, of course, was not the target. Paris was the beginning. And now we need to ask ourselves what are we going to do now? The first question is the following. Policymakers have to give clear and reliable signals. This is the only way that enterprises, investors and consumers will be able to make long-term decisions. And this means that states must really deliver on what they promised in Paris. They need to put this into practice at home. And this means that industrialized countries need to support other countries that are not really able to make this transition on their own. It also means that we all need to close ranks. When there are individual states that put or call the agreement into question. And rest assured that Germany and the European Union will do this in any case. Security that allows people to plan. This means that we need to develop long-term strategies at national level. In Germany, we have our climate protection plan for 2050. And I've realized that there's a great deal of international interest in this plan. In Germany, we have looked at or developed sector-specific targets for individual sectors. These will be applied by 2030, which is an intermediate step up to 2050. So individual sectors will be assigned some emission allowances, if you will. This also shows that we have major tasks for the next 13 years. We want, of course, to reach our long-term goal of cutting our greenhouse gas emissions by 95% by 2050 compared to 1990. Now that green energy is marketable and that it is able to compete on the market, we need to focus not only on the electricity sector, the power sector, but also in other areas. I've already spoken about transport, and we have a similar effort before us when it comes to buildings and construction, in particularly where heating and cooling is concerned, because heating and cooling accounts for about 1/3 of the energy we use across the world. And secondly, of course, policymakers need to make sure that we pave the way now, that we create the right incentives for change. And this means that we need to look at our subsidies and see whether they harm the climate, and if they do so, we need to abolish them. We need to act as an exemplary way. The public sector needs to be exemplary when it comes to investing in climate-friendly portfolios. And of course, many municipalities in Germany are already doing so. $90 billion. That's the amount of investment that we need to invest across the globe in renewing our infrastructure. This includes the energy, transport, and building and construction sectors. So let us use these investments to make sure that they are climate friendly. This includes public transport, modern energy grids, energy efficient buildings. These are all areas that have long investment cycles, and this is why we need to really take a long-term approach to these areas. Then there's a third answer to the question of what we need to do now. We need to make sure that the transition towards a society that is greenhouse gas neutral is supported by everyone, that we get everyone on board, because we won't be able to win this race against global warming unless we have everyone on board and unless we stop this inequality in the world. And worse, if we create new inequality. We need to make sure that we get the developing countries on board as well, and the emerging economies. Let's take the example of electricity. At the moment, rising electricity prices hit those the most that really don't have money to live on in the first place. And of course, affordable electricity is part of a very basic public service, and we must not forget this when we make the transition towards renewables. Then there is structural change, which will of course be caused by the decarbonizing of our economies. It is true that we need to create the right framework for climate-friendly growth, but at the same time we must not forget those people whose jobs depend on fossil fuels. So my goal for Germany, for instance, is to make sure that the phase-out of lignite will happen in consensus with the regions affected, with the companies affected and employees. We want to create new structures to replace the old ones. Ladies and gentlemen, climate change, and there can be no question about that, is a driver for innovation and jobs. It is a massive modernization program for our economies. And it is a massive program for modernization. And of course, this modernization has to happen in a way that is socially just. We need a just transition. And as I said at the beginning, we are at the beginning of a very long road, and we should not pretend that we know all the answers already. Of course, the way towards greenhouse gas neutrality won't be easy and it won't be straight. Sometimes we will do a little meandering and sometimes we'll make mistakes. And maybe in 20 years' time we will talk about technologies that we don't even know about today. And of course, we will also have to learn to adapt to the unavoidable impact of climate change. So we are in the midst of a massive learning curve. So let us make sure that we are bold enough to learn from one another. And Germany wants to make use of its G20 presidency to create a lot of opportunities for dialogue. We want to ensure that people understand that investing in climate protection is investing in prosperity. We have commissioned a study from the OECD that really looks into this in a very scientific way. And the title of the study is Investing in Climate, Investing in Growth. And we expect the results to be ready in time for a Petersburg Climate Dialogue in May. And this study will then also form the basis of the deliberations at the G20 summit in Hamburg. Our goal is to create a joint plan for action for the climate, for energy and growth. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, there's still a lot to talk about for us. And this is the spirit in which I wish you fruitful dialogue. Maybe we can see each other again next year. Thank you.
Many thanks.